The most dangerous liar isn't the person who looks nervous. It's the person who makes you feel crazy for noticing the truth. They don't always hide the evidence. Sometimes they manipulate your interpretation of it. And once you learn these signs, you may realize you've been ignoring someone's true intentions for much longer than you thought. Because the final sign doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like kindness. Most people try to detect lies by watching someone's eyes, nervousness, or body language. That's where they make their first mistake. Because a skilled manipulator can control their expression. What they can't easily hide forever is their pattern of behavior. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to watch for, and why staying calm may reveal more than confronting someone ever could. The first sign is simple. Their words and behavior keep contradicting each other. Someone says they respect your boundaries, but repeatedly crosses them. They say they care, but only appear when they need something. They promise they'll change, then repeat the same behavior. One contradiction proves very little. People make mistakes. People forget. People fail. But when the same contradiction happens again and again, you're no longer looking at an accident. You're looking at a pattern. And here's where people get trapped. They keep listening to explanations instead of watching behavior. They think, maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe this time is different. Maybe I'm being too harsh. But actions don't need a speech to explain them. Consistency is information. So don't ask only, what did they say? Ask, what keeps happening? Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden. You're simply giving the explanation more weight than the evidence. And that leads to the second sign. But wait, what if the biggest clue isn't what someone says, but what they do when you ask a perfectly reasonable question? Because that's when many people accidentally reveal themselves. Watch what happens when you ask for clarity. You ask, why did you do that? Instead of answering, they say, why are you interrogating me? You ask, what happened? They respond, you clearly don't trust me. Notice what just happened. You asked for information. Now you're defending yourself. The conversation has completely changed. You're no longer asking about their behavior. You're explaining why you had the right to ask. This doesn't mean every defensive person is a manipulator. People can become emotional for innocent reasons. But if someone repeatedly avoids simple questions by attacking your character, pay attention. Because sometimes the refusal to answer is more informative than the answer. A disciplined person doesn't need to force a confession. They observe, they listen, they remember, and most importantly, they don't reveal everything they've noticed. Because when you react too quickly, you give people information about what affects you. And that brings us to something even more dangerous. Imagine you notice that someone keeps changing their story. You mention it. They tell you you're overthinking. You bring up another example. They tell you you're too sensitive. You remember exactly what happened. They insist you remembered it incorrectly. After enough conversations, something changes. You stop questioning them. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm the problem. And that's the moment manipulation becomes powerful. Because the goal isn't always to make you believe a lie. Sometimes the goal is much simpler. Make you distrust your ability to recognize one. And once that happens, you don't need to be controlled. You'll start controlling yourself for them. This is one of the most important signs. Not because every disagreement means manipulation, but because repeated dismissal can slowly destroy your confidence in your own perception. A healthy person can disagree with you and still allow you to have your own perspective. A manipulative person may repeatedly make the conversation about what's supposedly wrong with you. You're too sensitive, too suspicious, too emotional, too difficult, too dramatic. Eventually, you stop trusting your own observations. So use a simple Stoic discipline. Separate facts from interpretations. Ask, what did I actually observe? What did they actually say? What happened repeatedly? What am I assuming? This prevents two dangerous extremes: blind trust and blind suspicion. You don't need to assume everyone is lying. You simply need to stop abandoning your judgment because someone confidently tells you that your perception is wrong. Maybe you've experienced this. You noticed something early. You felt uncomfortable. But you ignored it because you wanted to believe the best about someone. Then months later, the pattern became obvious. And the painful part wasn't only what they did. It was realizing, I saw the signs. I just didn't trust myself enough to act on them. Don't turn that lesson into paranoia. Turn it into awareness. Listen carefully. You cannot control whether someone lies. You cannot control someone's motives. You cannot control whether they betray your trust. But you can control something far more important: how much access their behavior has to your mind. Here's a sign people rarely talk about. Watch how someone treats you when you stop being useful. Some people are incredibly warm when you agree with them. They praise you. They help you. They make you feel special. But the moment you say no, everything changes. The kindness disappears. The praise becomes guilt. The favor becomes a debt. After everything I've done for you, now ask yourself, was that kindness or was it leverage? Real kindness doesn't require permanent obedience. Real loyalty survives a boundary. And this is where Machiavelli's worldview becomes useful. Not because you should manipulate others, but because you should understand that actions often reveal interests more clearly than words reveal intentions. So don't only watch how someone treats you when you're useful. Watch how they treat you when you have nothing to offer. That's when you learn what the relationship actually costs. But there's still one mistake people make after learning all of this. And it looks like strength. They become cold. They trust nobody. They question everything. They assume every compliment has an agenda. They call it wisdom. But sometimes, it's fear wearing the mask of intelligence. And that is the final trap. Real strength isn't becoming emotionless. It's becoming self-controlled. There's a huge difference. An emotionally weak person reacts instantly. An emotionally cold person may suppress everything. But a disciplined person does something better. They feel the emotion without surrendering the decision to it. You can care without becoming dependent. Trust without becoming blind. Forgive without giving unlimited access. Set boundaries without seeking revenge. Walk away without needing the other person to understand. That is strength. The Stoic doesn't say, nobody will ever hurt me. The Stoic says, even if someone hurts me, they don't get to decide who I become afterward. That's the difference between protection and paranoia. So now we can see the signs. Contradictory behavior, avoiding questions, attacking your perception, conditional kindness, emotional control disguised as strength. But these signs all point to one deeper question. How do you become difficult to deceive without becoming impossible to trust? The answer is not to become suspicious of everyone. It's to become observant without becoming paranoid. Watch patterns. Don't obsess over isolated moments. Separate facts from assumptions. Notice how people behave when they don't get what they want. Notice how they treat people who can't benefit them. Notice how they react when you say no. And most importantly, notice whether their actions consistently match their words. This is Stoic power. You control your attention, your response, your interpretation, your boundaries, your standards, your actions. But you release what isn't yours. Their opinions, their approval, their emotions, their decisions, their behavior, their intentions, the past, and the outcome. You don't become powerful by controlling everyone around you. You become powerful when very little around you can control what's happening inside you. Remember the opening? The most dangerous liar isn't always the person who looks nervous. It's the person who makes you doubt what you already noticed. Now you can see the deeper truth. The real defense against manipulation isn't learning how to manipulate better. It's learning how to observe without surrendering your judgment. And here's the truth. The goal was never to control other people. The goal was to stop allowing other people to control you. You don't need everyone to admit the truth before you set a boundary. You don't need a confession before you walk away from a repeated pattern. You don't need revenge. You need clarity. Watch patterns. Protect your attention. Trust slowly. Question calmly. And when someone's behavior repeatedly contradicts their words, believe the pattern. Not because everyone is evil, but because your peace deserves evidence. Remember these 4 things. Watch patterns, not promises. Separate facts from assumptions. Watch how people react when you say no. And never surrender your judgment simply because someone speaks with confidence. Because real strength isn't knowing how to control people. It's knowing when someone is trying to control you, and having enough discipline to refuse the invitation. Control what you can. Accept what you cannot. And remain disciplined in everything between the two. If this changed the way you see human behavior, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, psychology, philosophy, and self-mastery. And remember, the most dangerous liar isn't always the person who looks suspicious. Sometimes, it's the person who makes you feel foolish for noticing the truth. Now you know what most people miss. And once you start seeing the pattern, you won't be able to unsee it.